The war on the streets between the gangster disciples and the black disciples over control of the drug trade on the south side of Chicago started in 1989 in Englewood, but would soon spread to the largest housing project in the world, the Robert Taylor homes, despite the best efforts of feared BD minister Mickey Bull. In the mid-'80s, black gangster disciples in Englewood dropped the black from their name and referred to themselves as gangster disciples to highlight their differences with former allies in the Black Gangster Disciples Nation, foreshadowing what would happen next. Jerome Shorty Freeman, the king of the BDs, and Robert Cole Black Doherty's, the powerful GD board member, tasked by Chairman Larry Hoover to run the GDs on the low end, were both sent back to prison in 1989, leaving leadership on the streets to younger members like William Edwards, aka Too Short, from the Robert Taylor homes. And, in a jailhouse interview with Robert D. Williams, Too Short described his life as a gangster disciple in the projects. His building was a GD building, so of course he became one himself. Back in those days, the structure of the organization wasn't strong like today, and everyone was basically doing their own thing, Too Short says. Then one of the folks named Cole Black got released from the joint and started organizing the GDs all across the low end. During his bit, he had started to build with some of the other folks from the other projects like Ida B. Wells, the 8 Keys, and Stateway Gardens. He organized the GDs and brought structure after receiving instructions from Larry Hoover himself in the joint. Then one day, Too Short met Cole Black. Cole Black was real close to Larry Hoover, but then Cole Black caught a case. It said that he was framed by the cops. He was sentenced to prison, but before he left, Larry Hoover gave him one last request, and that was to find someone to fill his shoes while he served his sentence. He found Too Short and Crusher, and they started visiting Larry Hoover.
In the hot summer of 1991, some GDs were ready for war with the BDs, but Mickey Bull was holding relations tight between the two organizations. Bull was not expecting GDs to come after him because there was no full-fledged war yet, despite several shootings in the Englewood neighborhood, and he was also Mr. Untouchable because most of the BDs, and most of the GDs alike, feared and respected him, or so he thought. Mickey was mild-mannered and charming, but he would also have no tolerance for those that crossed him. When he walked the streets, he had a special whistle that BDs knew. When Mickey whistled, it meant he was summoning some soldiers for business. It didn't matter what you were doing. If you were lying in bed with the flu, if you were lying in bed with your girl, if you were taking a shit, it didn't matter. You had to stop everything and rush outside to Mickey when he whistled. In the 1970s, Mickey Bull led the Black Disciples takeover of the 5 white buildings on 51st and State Street, and the Red Building, where meetings were held at 4950 South State, from the first gang to colonize the Robert Taylor homes, then known as the Egyptian Cobras, even convincing Cobras in the 4844 building, known as Fidel Castro Cobras, to flip to BD. In the year 1982, Mickey Bull and the BDs took over the long-standing Mickey Cobra buildings near 45th and State. This was the 4555 and 4525 buildings, which the Cobras held since 1962. This left the Mickey Cobras with only the Hole, which was 3 buildings located on 53rd and State Street. So, Mickey Bull had successfully pushed the MCs south of 53rd Street. And even though the BDs were smaller in number when compared to the GDs, he convinced most of the Dell Vikings to flip to BD, making sure his gang had a presence in the Stateway Gardens projects. King Shorty blessed Mickey Bull with the rank of bishop over all of the ministers on the south side, which meant that he didn't just control daily drug operations in the Robert Taylor homes for the BDs, he ran the whole south side, from Bronzeville to the Wild Hundreds. Mickey Bull had this kind of power, and enemies could not touch him, so he thought, because he could see it coming. So, in the summer of 1991, he never expected the GDs to come at him, but that is exactly what happened. Did Larry Hoover put out a hit on Mickey Bull? I'll let you do the math, but if you believe that Too Short and his young gunners in the Robert Taylor homes had the audacity to kill someone like Mickey Bull without at least the implicit approval of the chairman, then I invite you to subscribe to the Cartoon News Network and learn more about Too Short in our video titled The Vienna Tapes. Whether Larry Hoover ordered the hit on Mickey Bull or not, it was all-out warfare either way. Eye for an eye. Shoot ops on sight. Not long after Mickey Bull was murdered, On August 7, 1991, 3 members of the Gangster Disciples Street Gang were killed during 2 drive-by shootings from a taxi cab in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood by members of the Black Disciples. Yeah, you heard me. They did 2 drive-bys in a stolen taxi cab, which is really crazy, but also smart. According to court records, in the case of the people of the state of Illinois versus Terrence Brooks, Jerome Taylor, aka Marcus Taylor, testified that in the late afternoon hours of August 7, 1991, he was standing at the corner of 66th and Peoria Streets. The building at that corner is a hangout for the Gangster Disciples. They sold drugs in front of the building. Crard and Kevin Gibbs were with Taylor on the afternoon of August 7 when Tojo drove by. Taylor had known Tojo for 4 or 5 years. Tojo flashed a gang sign at them, and Gibbs flashed one back and said, "BDK, Black Disciple Killers," to which Tojo replied, "GDK, Gangster Disciple Killers." Someone from the building fired a shot at Tojo's car, and Tojo drove to the middle of the block, and then said that he would be back. Taylor testified that the Gangster Disciples were at war with the Black Disciples at the time. At 11 p.m. the same day, Taylor was selling drugs in front of the same building with Bustle, Taylor's cousin, and Crard. Taylor saw 2 cars drive up. The one in front was a red LeBaron, and the other was a taxicab. The LeBaron stopped in the middle of the intersection, and the taxicab stopped in front of the building. Taylor noticed the windows on the taxicab's passenger side being rolled down, and saw the nose of a gun come out. Shortly after that, more bullets would fly from the taxicab at 618 West 71st Street. These drive-by shootings in 1991 are notable, only because of the use of a taxicab. Brazen acts of violence increased, as the gang wars intensified throughout the city.
In 1995, Too Short was arrested and charged in the RICO drug conspiracy case that sent Larry Hoover to Supermax ADX Florence Prison in Colorado to serve 6 life sentences in 1997. The severe deterioration of the Robert Taylor homes and high rates of crime led to the decision by the city to demolish these buildings, starting in 1998. The first 3 to be torn down were The Hole, as these were in the worst condition. As evictions were taking place in 1997 through 1998, the Mickey Cobra Street Gang fought their way north against the Black Disciples and Gangster Disciples, trying to take back territory in other buildings to prevent their extinction in the projects, and the members also knew that many of them would be relocated to other areas on the low end, so it was best to get an early start on gaining a foothold northbound. This led to a nasty slew of violence in the later 1990s as the first Robert Taylors were torn down. For his part, Robert Cold Black Doherty's avoided the RICO indictment that brought down other leaders of the GDs in 1995 because he was already in jail on the murder charge from 1989. Ironically, he was released 20 years before his little homie, Too Short, returned home, but was murdered near the Robert Taylor homes in May 2001. A violent gang war continued all through the early 2000s until everyone was evacuated in 2005, and then in March of 2007, the last building was torn down. The case, Gautreaux versus Chicago Housing Authority, was a class action lawsuit brought on behalf of public housing resident and community organizer Dorothy Gautreaux in 1966, and it sought to end systemic racial discrimination in Chicago's public housing. The lawsuit alleged CHA discriminated by concentrating poor black residents in high-rises and segregated communities and not allowing them the opportunity to move into public housing communities in white neighborhoods. The case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which sided with the residents and determined that they were being isolated to specific neighborhoods. The specific terms of the remedies to cure irreparable damage to black residents in public housing are still being negotiated from a Supreme Court case decided in the 1960s. According to a Chicago Tribune article published on July 31, 2024, attorneys for both sides negotiated a settlement in 2019, with CHA agreeing to continue developing scattered site housing and engage in discussions on how to improve the housing voucher mobility program. The settlement also called for CHA to provide a detailed schedule to complete mixed-income housing complexes and create early learning childhood development programs at 4 existing public housing developments. The original settlement was to last for 5 years, and if CHA failed on its promises, it could return to court. Both CHA and the plaintiffs returned to court recently, as they agreed there were outstanding requirements to be met at 6 development projects, according to a joint motion filed with the court Tuesday. The extension, agreed to by both Impact for Equity, formerly known as BPI, the group representing the plaintiffs, and CHA, gives the Housing Authority more years to complete obligations outlined in the original settlement agreement, and comes during a time when there continues to be a significant lack of housing, particularly a dearth of affordable housing in Chicago. It also follows CHA's controversial decision to lease some of its land, which formerly held public housing, for the Chicago Fire Football Club's new training facility. According to the new terms of the settlement agreement, CHA will have 1 to 3 years, depending on the project, to complete certain development plans, including for Altgeld Gardens, lakefront properties, Madden, Wells, Rockwell Gardens, Stateway Gardens, and Robert Taylor Homes. Both parties did agree, however, that CHA had met its obligations to build public housing in areas outside segregated black neighborhoods, so the Housing Authority will no longer be subject to court oversight for that part of the agreement. The case, which was filed in 1966 and became the longest-running housing discrimination case in the country, spurred CHA to build and renovate scattered-site housing throughout the city. It also shaped the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the primary federal housing voucher program, formerly known as Section 8, which allows public housing authorities to provide subsidies to low-income residents who find housing in the private market, including in more affluent neighborhoods. About a week before the 2019 settlement was reached, nearly a dozen current CHA residents argued that it wasn't time to end the suit. Because housing vouchers require units to be inspected and are limited in their cash value, voucher holders often face discrimination in the private market, residents told the judge. Most can't afford to use their vouchers in affluent communities and still end up concentrated in poorer neighborhoods. At the same time, some housing advocates accused lawyers representing the plaintiffs of failing to address the concerns of actual CHA residents and cutting them out of any decision-making when it came to their future. Thank you for watching the Cartoon News Network's feature presentation, Worst Places to Live, the world's largest housing project, the Robert Taylor Homes. In the very near future, we will continue our series on the worst places to live in Chicago, with a deep dive into the Ida B. Wells projects. Before that, make sure you ring that notification bell because we have more videos about Larry Hoover and the Gangster Disciples coming soon.